Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today on our webinar on strategies to grow your staffing business. My name is Katrina O'Kane and I'm the VP of Strategic Growth at PGC Group, and I'm joined by my colleague Jeremy, who is our Chief Commercial Officer, and then we're also joined today by Rachel from Staffing eTrainer. We wanted to put together this presentation for you because a lot of our agencies want to continuously improve and do better within the staffing market. And often they come to us with questions as to how to do that. So we decided to draft in an expert. Rachel has over 23 years staffing experience and has been doing training for quite some time. I actually was lucky enough to attend one of her training sessions and it was amazing. So we're so happy today to have her here presenting to everyone.
Thanks, Katrina. I just wanted to give everyone a quick summary on what PGC does as a business, just so you're understanding who is behind this presentation in support with Staffing Trainer. So PGC is essentially an employer of record. We're set up in the US and Canada, in all 50 states and 13 provinces and territories. We partner with staffing agencies across the Americas, but also internationally as well. And we manage all of the back office pieces in terms of insurance, payroll, benefits, and we're powered by tech. It's our own piece of tech called Precision, and we help staffing agencies grow and scale across America. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Rachel to take us through the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel Modrak, and I've been in the staffing industry since 1997, working for leading national and global staffing firms. Currently, I'm part of Staffing eTrainer, and we work with staffing companies to strengthen their greatest asset, the skills of their internal teams. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about how you can grow your staffing business. Today, we'll be focusing on three key topics. First, the staffing industry market. We'll look at some data, statistics, sectors, type of staffing, and understand why companies use. Next, we'll talk about the importance of differentiation. How can you stand out from the competition and create value statements to help drive your messaging? Lastly, we'll talk strategy, what to think about when creating a plan for both sales and recruiting. So let's get started. So pop quiz, how large do you think the US staffing and recruiting industry is? It's huge. 90% of companies use staffing agencies. It's a $160 billion industry in the United States. So let's look at some statistics. There are over 20,000 staffing companies in the US. America's staffing companies hire 16 million temporary and contract employees each year, 76% of which work full-time hours, and 35% of employees were offered a permanent job by a client where they worked on an assignment. This graphic shows you which sectors make up that $160 billion in revenue. I want to point out, while healthcare is the smallest sector, it's also the fastest growing, as each year more Americans have access to healthcare. It also has tremendous impact on the growth for other sectors as well. So if your staffing business falls into the office clerical sector, targeting healthcare companies or businesses that service healthcare companies would be beneficial to you. There are three primary types of staffing in the marketplace. Most common is temporary, sometimes referred to as contract. In this arrangement, the staffing agency is responsible for the recruiting, hiring, and managing of the employees. The staffing agency is the employer on record, although most often the work is performed at the company's site. All payroll and benefits are administered by the staffing agency. What's the difference between temporary and contract? Very little, but usually long-term, higher paid, highly skilled temporary positions are often referred to as contract positions. An example might be a software engineer that's paid $100 an hour for a 2-year assignment would probably be referred to as a contractor. The next most common staffing model is a temporary to hire or contract to hire arrangement. When a company sets parameters around a temporary position converting to a full-time role. This arrangement gives companies and candidates a try before you buy scenario. Many staffing agencies will set a buyout fee or waive the fee after a minimum number of hours have been billed. Last most common staffing model is the direct hire model. In this arrangement, the staffing agency recruits candidates and manages the hiring process. However, the candidate will work directly for the company. The fee for the candidate is typically an agreed upon percentage of that salary, and it often includes a guarantee period. Another type of staffing model that you may come across is a master service provider, usually known as an MSP. MSPs are third-party companies that manage a temporary staffing program for a company. There are tons of MSPs. Some of the largest include Agile One, TapFin, and SourceRight. MSPs will typically service large companies with multiple locations. If you engage with an MSP, the MSP is essentially then your customer. During your sales process, if you come across MSPs, you should first always ask, are there exceptions to the contract for using another staffing company? If you'd like to work with a specific MSP, PGC may already be part of an MSP program that you'd like to work with. So you should contact your PGC rep for more information. It's really critical to understand why companies use staffing providers. First would be the expertise that they bring. Using a staffing provider allows a company to focus their efforts on their core business. The staffing company should have access to better talent, because for staffing companies, their pipelines of candidates is essentially their product. They can pull from their own network and are the experts on how to uncover the best talent. There are a variety of ways for companies to save money to their bottom line by using a staffing agency, such as time to hire, reducing turnover, and minimizing risk, which is our next reason that companies use staffing providers. The staffing company is the employee of record and will assume all that risk. Lastly, and probably most importantly, is the flexibility that staffing companies provide to make it possible for their clients to hire workforce fast for short or long-term or long periods of time, in part-time roles and full-time roles, allowing the company to quickly adjust and adapt based on their business needs. So what do companies want from staffing providers? First, a staffing company that provides a value, offering a service to them that's better than what they currently have. Second, they want to work with staffing companies that understand their business, one that offers solutions or services that fit their needs. Third, strong communication. The number one complaint we typically see in surveys are companies complain about the lack of follow-up or not hearing enough from their staffing company. Lastly, they want honesty and transparency. Don't make promises you can't keep. Companies that truly value staffing agencies is because they consider them a partner and vital to the success of their business. So how do you become a partner? Give them what they want. Show the value you bring by selling the problems that you solve instead of selling just staffing. Work to understand their business, focusing on their needs. Communicate often and, most importantly, consistently. And above else, always be honest. If you can't meet their request, be transparent on why and offer what you can do. With over 20,000.
Oh, I was going to ask a question on that. So whenever an agency is looking to start to understand a business's needs, is there any advice you would give on how to approach that? Like, what would be this first sort of protocol that they would do in that regard?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to lead with the message that you need to learn more. I think some salespeople will make the mistake of their sales call objectives to get a job order first and foremost. Instead, if you lead with, let me learn about your business and determine if we could be a better solution than what you're doing now before I take that job order. So it's about listening, asking key questions, and really thinking about what's the need of the customer.
Amazing. Thank you.
Great question. So with over 20,000 staffing companies, it's important to set yourself apart from the competition. And there's lots of different ways you should be thinking about how can you stand out. Maybe you service niche markets or specific industries. Perhaps you plan to offer unique services. Maybe you want to talk about your company values or the size. Larger staffing firms will talk about, we're large, we can service multiple locations. On the flip side, we're small, we can offer increased service. What's your reputation in the marketplace? Testimonials, perhaps awards or certifications. You can always set yourself apart by cost, quality of candidates, or even your quantity of candidates. Think about the tenure or the experience that you or your team have that might set you apart. Often in the US market, we see benefits that are offered to temporary workers to help reduce turnover and increase retention. And even your technology, maybe that helps you decrease time to fill or offer more reporting. With those 20,000 staffing companies, it's critical to stand out from the competition. But your number one differentiation should always be you and your team, because you know none of your competitors have that. Knowing what makes you stand out or what's different helps you build your value proposition. A value proposition answers the question on your prospects' minds, why should I use you? You must give them a really good reason to take action. Because people only change if a better option is better than the status quo and can positively impact their key business drivers. So when you think about building your value proposition, it should help you communicate how you can be valuable to their business. It's what makes you unique. So if you think back to a few slides, all of the different applicable ways you can be different, why that matters to a company, and the outcome that they can expect. So an example might be, we're unique because our recruiters have experience in your industry. That gives us access to a network of candidates in your industry and we can make stronger matches. The result is quicker placement and less turnover, and that will have an impact on your productivity. There are three critical components to the business development side of the staffing business. First, having a sales strategy, focusing on the customer, and following a structured sales process. So I want to dig into these for a little bit. Many of my clients hire me to help them increase sales. And whenever I start working with them, we use a checklist just like the one you see. So I hope this can be helpful. First you want to create that value proposition, what we've been talking about for the past few slides. Next, you want to define who is your target customer. Think about what does the company look like that you can be successful working with. Maybe you will target specific sizes, specific industries, positions, or skill sets. You'll want to determine how you're going to gather leads and what tools you have. You'll want to think about your pipeline and what is it made up of. The best way to do that is to develop different pipeline categories. For example, your pipeline may be made up of the leads that you receive combined with the prospects that you're targeting. Maybe you'll have customers that there's additional business to expand within. You'll want to define your key performance indicators. Maybe it's how you will connect with your prospects, business you'll close, or orders you'll receive. You're going to determine how you're going to track those KPIs. And lastly, you really want to focus in on designing a structured sales process. And I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. But first, I want to draw your attention to thinking about, during the sales process, focusing on the customer. Guess what? Companies don't want to be sold to. So you want to think about, how can we sell solutions? How can we sell outcomes to our solutions, not necessarily just selling staffing? Learn everything you can about their business and needs before offering a solution. The best way to do all of this is ask a lot of questions, listen, and uncover the problems and the consequences to not solving those problems. So recent studies show that it takes us 10 to 12 attempts to close a sale. Most salespeople give up after 2 or 3 attempts, which means there's lots of opportunity if you can be disciplined in your sales process. So this is something, again, that I work with a lot of my clients on. Developing a 10 to 12 point touch during the sales process, made up of calls, emails, perhaps even U.S. postal mail. And we want to really have structure on steroids here. For our calls, following a script while we drive those value propositions. We always expect voicemail, but be prepared in case they do answer the phone for the call, defining the objective of the call, and really be prepared to overcome the most common objections you're going to hear. A great example, I think, of an objection that you might often is, "Oh, thanks for calling, but we're not hiring right now." A great way to overcome that objection would be, well, now would be a great time to speak and learn about each other to see if we could be a solution. So when you do have a need, you can think about us as a potential vendor. Even your emails really need to have structure. Design templates so that each email is different. And for example, so maybe on our third touch, which is an email, I might include a testimonial. On that fifth touch email, perhaps attach a really strong candidate that I want to skill market to them, especially if I know they have an open role. And maybe my last email, which is touch number 8, I show them how I know about their industry or share the competitors that I work with, their competitors of who I work with, so they know I understand the space. So here we were just 8 or 9 weeks ago complaining that there are not enough candidates. So how quickly everything has changed. And while we all hope to get back to that really strong economy, regardless of what the economic conditions are, it's critical to always be thinking about recruitment. It's your product. So you want to have a recruitment plan, really think about pipeline management, and focus on the candidate. So having a recruitment plan is critical, but it does not need to be complex. Here you can see an example. It's really about what recruitment actions will you take, who will be responsible for taking the action, and how often. I'll tell you, most staffing companies will post this in their office, maybe on a whiteboard, and each day talk about it. So they can really keep the focus on the accountability to the recruitment plan. The recruitment plan helps you build and continually refill your pipeline of candidates. This way you can be proactive and not reactive. If you got a job order today and just had to start the recruitment process now, you're already going to be behind the 8 ball. So you want to build a pipeline of candidates for each position or skill set you typically place. And as you move or place one candidate, that opens a space for another candidate on your pipeline. So you may think this goes without saying, but as recruiters, we tend to lead with what we need, when in fact, staffing companies that focus on the core needs of a candidate are always more successful. Candidates feel most connected to recruiters when they feel the recruiter cares about them. So how do you show you care? Well, first off, you want to ask questions about them. Ask them often, what can I do for you? How can I help you? And lastly, and really important, make it as easy as possible for the candidate to move forward in the process. Reevaluate if, a candidate that's interested in a position you have has to now click on a link and spend an hour filling out paperwork and profiles. Really think about how can we speed that process up and make it as easy as possible. When you think about targeting prospects, always follow the path of where the greatest needs are today. So I have a few solutions for you to find where those needs are. First off, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, their website, bls.gov, is a fantastic resource. They're constantly measuring where's the hiring by industry, by position. You can even drill down to locations. A great resource is just tapping into the job boards. Take a search. Who's hiring? What are they hiring for? How many roles are out there so that you can really see the demand? And another tip would be follow the headlines. Always, today's headlines, what's happening right now with the COVID-19 crisis, we see industries such as grocery, pharmaceutical, healthcare, contact centers, financial and insurance services, and supply chain are really booming, and all of them are currently hiring. Put thought into that supply chain as well. For example, we all know grocery stores can't keep products on the shelves. And you might be thinking, well, how does that matter to me? I don't place grocery store clerks. But really think about what it took, all the companies, the products and services to get that item on the shelf at the grocery store. And do any of your prospects have their hand somewhere in the supply chain? The last thing I want to leave you with, now is the time to be connecting with new talent. Take advantage of building relationships with previously unavailable candidates that have been laid off or furloughed. And then skill market your best talent to your customers and prospects. So I want to thank you for watching today's presentation. I hope that whether you're new to the U.S. staffing market or you're just looking for ways to strengthen and improve your staffing business, you learned a few key takeaways to help you take action. I'm now going to turn it back over to our hosts, Katrina and Jeremy, to see if we have any questions.
Hey, Rachel. Firstly, thank you for that. That was absolutely fantastic. I think I've learned a lot in the past 30 minutes, so I really do appreciate that. I had a quick question around the kind of contact process you had, where you had the different calls, the emails and the mails. Have you found if there's a particular kind of sales methodology that seems to work for recruiters? Is it perhaps dependent on industry, or is there a particular kind of method, like spin, challenger, this kind of stuff? Is there something that you've seen work particularly well in staffing in the US?
So I think that's a great question. And I've seen, a lot of different popular sales models work. I think they're all fantastic. The key divider there is usually, are they being utilized? I think it's sometimes easiest for recruiters and salespeople to just go back to relying on, we have candidates. We want to help you fill your open position. And instead of focusing on what that is, that consultative type of sale. And that's how you set yourself apart, because with all the competition out in the marketplace, anybody can push a candidate or get a job order. You want to be different, learn about their business, be a consultant. And you know what? That also means sometimes being able to say, I'm not sure if it's the right time for us to work together, but I think in the future we can have a relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree, Rachel. And, the points around that you made around digging into the client's problems and pain points and the solutions that you're bringing to those, I think is the most crucial part. And I think people are able to deviate from a methodology to a different methodology, but I think those points that you made are probably the most important, really. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah, I actually had a question.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just going to say, Katrina, that when I do a sales training, we really talk about those consequences, because that's the money. I always say, when you can find out how and why they're suffering, because that's going to help you leverage how you can change that situation. So if their biggest problem is turnover, which is costing them time and money, you design a solution of how you're going to overcome that and show them that cost savings. You're really setting yourself up for success.
Perfect. When you're thinking as well about the different touch points and like communicating with clients, do you think as well like LinkedIn contributes to that? Like if you're, commenting on posts, or maybe you're connecting in those sort of ways as well, do you think that adds, or is that standalone to actual proactive outreach?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A larger plan would really include your marketing. And so when I think about how you appear on social media, how you network with people, I think about, that marketing plan. So you could insert that into the different ways that you want to connect with people in that, 10 to 12 touches, or it could just be part of a broader strategy. because regardless, I hope you do have a way to show in those social media forums, you know, what value you do bring to that community.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think marketing is something as well that has to be considered and is often an afterthought, but it just shows the importance of considering that in your sales cycle and how that can contribute and really strengthen that message.
Yeah. And what you said there, it's so much about message, right? And I think that some staffing companies will say, well, gosh, I'd love to have marketing, but I don't have a budget for it. And I think there's so much great information out there by doing some searches on what you can do on your own. And it's really about just consistently putting your message out there. So similar to how we looked at that recruitment plan, you know, where are you going to post your message, how often, and who is responsible? You know, that's going to give you the foundations of good marketing.
Yeah.
Rachel, one of the things you mentioned was about agencies focusing on a particular niche that they can specialize in. People that perhaps tend to do that are maybe a smaller agency size. I'm just wondering whether you've seen that work well when they look at it across a national level, or whether it's focused on a state. Do you have any kind of advice or guidance on that, where, you know, how people, because obviously the US is a huge country, lots and lots of opportunities, and sometimes it can probably be a bit overwhelming when focusing on a niche. What are your thoughts around kind of national or state or something else?
Yeah, you know, I think when you focus on a niche, there's two key components of that. You know, first off, it shows to your prospects and customers that you have a focus and you're better for that focus. And then the second piece of that, you yourself can be much more efficient by having that focus. Because if you looked at your job orders and they were 6 totally different positions and locations, that is really difficult. You know, the closer you can get your pipeline to being applicable to how, you know, you do your business, you're going to be able to fill jobs faster and provide a better service to your clients. But when you think about or look at, you know, the largest staffing players in the United States, Randstad, Adecco, Manpower, Kelly Services, most of them have smaller brands under their umbrella that service those niche markets, because they see the value in being able to get in front of those customers to really talk about that focus.
Yeah, while we're actually on that, you mentioned some of the larger companies. Now, when a smaller agency perhaps is competing with this larger company, larger agency, how can they differentiate themselves or perhaps come across as a better fit to the company?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, you know, I've worked for both small and large staffing companies, so I understand what the pros and cons are of each. But if you're small and you're consistently finding yourself competing with large staffing companies, I will tell you to focus on the service side of things. Because those large companies are stretched thin. You know, their benefits is that they have a lot of resources and a very big reach, but they can't always really get to know their customers, provide custom solutions, and really build relationships. So try to leverage that. And a great way is to ask questions of, you know, what has your experience been with those providers? And do you think there's an opportunity to get better service from a smaller company?
Thanks for that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, because similar to what I said about the MSPs earlier, that you can always ask if they can work outside the MSP contract. The same goes when you hear a hiring manager tell you, gosh, I'd love to work with you, but my company has this big contract with Adecco. I would still always ask, well, have you ever worked with, or are there exceptions to work with another staffing company beyond that? Because typically all those contracts are set up that if those providers cannot provide candidates, that those hiring managers are able to use another staffing agency.
That's really interesting. I think like utilizing and sort of using your relationship with the hiring manager in those scenarios. Yeah, leveraging that. That's really good advice. One thing that we kind of see as well is obviously a big aspect of doing contract staffing is the cost savings for a business. But it's hard sometimes when a business can't necessarily see that because they look at like an hourly rate and they in their head think, oh, that's very expensive. Is there any advice you would give to agencies of how to really communicate that cost benefit, or any tips on that?
Yeah, and I think it depends who you're having the conversation with, right? Because I do agree, if you're a hiring manager and you don't understand the cost that it might take to hire and employ someone, you might not see the staffing provider as a cost savings. But in that place, you probably want to share some studies and information. And SHRM is usually a great place to find a lot of these studies on what the cost of turnover is. Because is it 3 or 4 times of that salary? Or how much it can take to hire a new employee? Another one would be how long it takes. You know, a lot of companies, it takes them months to find someone. Well, if they could shorten that cycle, where's that cost savings? And I also think there's probably some good resources at some of the staffing associations, like the American Staffing Associations, that probably would show you the average cost savings model that would help you with those talking points.
Perfect, thanks.
And then Rachel, another one from me, sorry. With lead generation, I know you gave a few different ideas there. Getting to the right person and getting the right contact information, are there any tools or platforms or different ways in which you've seen work quite well for a recruitment agency to apply?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to thinking about your, target profile customer. We talked about, what's their size, maybe specific industries or locations. Once you can hone in on, okay, maybe here's 5 to 10 different companies I want to target, I would next go look at their openings and sort of put on your detective hat by using the job boards, their internal job board, post it to their website, combined with a LinkedIn, to try to almost, draw out who do you think is the hiring manager for this particular role. And then whether you're using LinkedIn, there's also some fantastic tools out there to uncover contact information. The one that I use, I don't endorse them, but the one that I use is Rocket Reach, where I could put in, Rachel Modrak's name, and I'm seeing what's their phone number and their email address so that I can reach directly out to them. But quite often you can figure out things like email addresses by, coming across just one for a company and what's that cadence of the email. Is it first name dot last name at abc.com? And then that helps you take that first step. Or you find out what office they work in and you call them. Lucky for us, in some ways, there's not a lot of receptionist screening calls, but it might just be a keypad system to dial by name. So that can also get you to that right person.
Got it, thank you.
You're welcome. So I think that must be all of the questions we have for today. Before we leave, if you do have a need now or in the future to strengthen the skills of your internal team, please consider Staffing eTrainer products and solutions. And while this was designed to be a quick presentation as an overview on how to grow your staffing business, I welcome you to connect with me to speak in greater detail on these topics. I love to talk about staffing, and perhaps I could be a resource to help you succeed. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day.